What makes a story impactful? Now, you might think a great story, if you've got a great story, it's going to be enough and it's going to make an impact. But the problem is if it's not well told, if the person telling the story doesn't connect with the audience, and there's no challenge or point of view, it's just not going to hit the mark.
Yeah, and this is where we can really learn something from Hollywood. We're also used to watching, films and TV shows that have really good structure. And really good structure is actually what you need to make a big impact.
All right, so let's talk about how do you make an impact with your video?
All right, so the first important thing is the messenger. That's our hero, the character who's telling us the story. Why is that so important?
I think it's really important that you have someone telling the story that your audience really connect and engage with. And we call them the messenger. And we're not talking about Facebook Messenger. We are talking about the person who's sharing the key messages with the audience, the hero, the character.
Absolutely. And this is so important to get this bit right. And one rule of thumb is you really want to cast your main character, your messenger, to be as close to the audience you're communicating to as possible, because we know that audiences relate most strongly to people like them.
So I think that putting some thought into who is the messenger for your story is really important, and it's often overlooked. And I don't think we can underestimate how important it is that the person telling your story, the person you cast as the hero of your story, they have to connect with your audience.
This is super important, guys. Picking your messenger, your hero, it's a casting exercise. And a really good rule of thumb is, where possible, cast your messenger to be as similar to your audience as possible, because we know that audiences will relate most strongly with people like them. What do you think, voiceover guy?
Mike, you are right. People want to hear from people they can relate to.
The next thing you really want to be thinking about is the challenge that your messenger or your hero or your lead character, what is the challenge? What's the thing that they've got to overcome? What would life look like if they could achieve this thing? What is that obstacle? So
absolutely. And sometimes if it's more messaged, it's about naming the problem, so that we're not just always talking about the solution. And that's where the stakes come in as well. Yeah. It's about saying that if we can't overcome this challenge, this obstacle, these are the consequences.
And you see it in every single, amazing drama, movies, comedies. It doesn't matter what it is. There's always a problem, and it's always seems insurmountable, and the hero hits that roadblock, the all is lost moment that they often talk about, in film writing terms, and they have to find a way through that, and that's what actually creates the jeopardy and keeps the audience interested.
I think it brings something else too. I think it often brings the human connection. Often the most powerful and emotionally engaging moments in your video come from this: challenges being named, problems being overcome. Often that's where you get the greatest empathy in your stories, and empathy is really important because empathy is what really connects your audience to your stories and keeps them engaged.
So really got to think about what's the challenge you're throwing down, and what is your hero going to do to overcome it.
So the next thing is really about the point of view. So how you're framing your story, and often that comes back to the purpose, the reason you are sharing this story.
And everybody loves talking about purpose at the moment, but you got to get really clear on what is purpose? What do you mean by it? How does your video have a purpose? And so that's really thinking about, what do you want people to take away? What is it that you want them to do once they've consumed the content you're creating?
Now, we've done quite a bit of work that's available around strategic communications planning, and often at the top of that communications pyramid is your broad goal. And people often find it really often the easiest thing to articulate is what's their big, hairy, audacious goal. to change the world. And that's a really great way to keep your North Star, to keep you focused on what your purpose is. And that needs to flow through all of your communications. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree 100%. You know, if you know what you're shooting for before you begin, you're going to have a much better chance of creating a project that really hits that mark and really gets people thinking in the way that you're hoping for them to think.
Yeah, and often that's what we come back to towards the end of the video, and we're getting towards the end of this video, so we want you guys to make the greatest impact you can with your communications, and that's why we're doing this. You know, that's our purpose, and we hope that you're getting that feeling from every one of the videos we're publishing.
So to recap on what makes a story impactful, the first thing you're doing is you're thinking about who is the messenger, who is going to deliver your story.
Okay, and the next thing we're talking about is the obstacles and barriers that need to be overcome, or naming the problem. Often this is where you get that real emotional connection between your characters, the story, and your audience.
And then it's the purpose. What is the purpose of your video? What do you want to have happen once people have seen your work?
All right, so if people want to learn more, what should they do next?
Well, I think they could probably go back to the last episode that we just did, episode 6, which was all about messaging, because I think once you're clear on your messaging, that will also really help create an impactful story.